push it. Okay, so then I want to apply it. I could go on through this, but it more or less makes it clear. He just extends the proposal and shows he will not only propose it, he will answer any objections that come to it. The objections have nothing to do with ethical objections. They're just simply computational things. And he answers all those problems in a way that would make today's economists very proud. Solves those problems. The ethical issue never arises. In this period, I'll say one final thing on the Enlightenment approach. It was David Hume, the Scottish Enlightenment philosopher, who made a distinction between facts, the facts of science, and the values that come from religion and ethics. And he says that we cannot base a society on values which are private and subjective. We have to appeal to the facts, the methodology of science. Religion is clearly of great value, but it's not objective, and it can't be used as a motivation for a society that wants to make progress. So he makes the fact-value distinction. And he says there's a great mistake that most people make when they say that things ought to be this way. They act as if it were a fact, just because they feel strongly about it. So Hume debunks the appeal to our emotions and our ethical sensibilities. He says this is not a good guide to public policy at all. The fact-value distinction. C.S. Lewis will write about this in the education system of the 1940s in England and call the outcome of this the abolition of man. I'm not going to deal with that text on this course, but I do deal with it in other texts. He'll call it the abolition of man. Okay, but I said I was going to come to contemporary application. Here it is. That's not it. This is it. Euthanasia in Canada. Whether you know it or not, it is legal to, what do they call it? What's the euphemism? Assisted death. Medically assisted death. Which has a nice ring to it because the doctors who are there to help you and help you with your health are going to assist you in your own situation of distress by helping you painlessly take your own life. That's the regime. This article, which was from the New Atlantis magazine, December 16th, just last year, barely a month and a half ago, says that 286 people across 4 countries agreed to donate their organs after the governments helped them to die. 286 from 4 different countries, because these are the countries in which assisted suicide is legally permissible. It's a new and advancing humanitarian approach to the problem of people wanting to take their life. It's presented in terms of humanitarian, right? Of those 286, half of them were Canadian, which is an interesting number. Canadian population is only 38 million. The countries concerned were more populous than Canada in some cases. The University of Manitoba ethicist Arthur Schaefer was very proud of the fact that over half of them were Canadians, because he said that they had the opportunity to make something morally significant out of their death. What is the moral significance? Well, they donated their organs to help other people. It's sacrificial. They're sacrificing their own life for the good of others. And at the same time, he does warn about a conflict of interest potentially there. And he says that nobody should be pressured into the MAID, the MAID program, medically assisted, what is it, ID, whatever the death is. I'm not sure what the I is, I've forgotten now. INDI, probably in. Just because the doctors are eager to have their organs. Nobody should be pressured into this just because there is a demand for organs. They shouldn't feel pressured. you have to wonder what's going on here. In this expose right here in the New Atlantis, he makes a comparison, and I encourage you to look at it. The name is Alex Raikin, Raikin. And notes this: California has the same population roughly as Canada. Actually, it has more. California has 40 million. We've got about 38. And they legalized medically assisted death in 2016, just like Canada. And in 2021, 486 people died in California through this program. In Canada, how many did we have? 10,064 deaths. 486, 10,064. Population size is the same. What would account for the discrepancy in numbers? Because this is not a small change. It's not a, you've added a zero and another zero almost. It's a magnitude of difference there. When you read the Raikin, he talks about it in terms of, he uses the provider's language in their own terminology. So the language of the bill is that you should only do this if the situation is grievous and irremediable. I can't even say it. Speak English. But it is presented as proud. There's a pride in the establishment at doing this. And it's a sign of the progress of Canada that we are, as a nation, on the cutting edge of helping people through the medical establishment take their own lives. And the providers, if they've experienced distress in this, there are counseling seminars to assist them when they feel squeamish or feel remorse about having assisted in this. So there's also a psychological branch to this that now they're providing jobs to placate the distress of those who are helping others take their own lives, even though it's for a good cause. And what's the good cause? Well, you're helping other people live. I hope you're seeing the analogy here. Comment or question?
I also find it's such a crazy contradiction where another big fight in our culture of Canada is to prevent non-medical assisted suicide.
Oh, yes.
And that was, especially during COVID, that was a huge fight against all of the things in COVID, like people are taking their lives. But then on the other hand, we're celebrating medical assisted deaths. And like, we're going to applaud ourselves for the one side of deaths going down, but also applaud ourselves for the other side of the deaths going up, which is just...
The irony could not be more delicious if you're speaking purely in ironic terms. The context of mandatory lockdowns to save people's lives and the measurement of saving people's lives happening at the same time that we're promoting the statistics that we're taking people's lives. All for the sake of people's health, by the same healthcare system. By the same healthcare system which set aside its own ethical code, by the way, which is the Nuremberg Code. And the Nuremberg Code arises, and we're now conflating all sorts of periods here, after the Nazis' practices during the Second World War, in which case they were experimenting on live human subjects without their knowledge or consent. And from that we got which was a notorious war crime. I mean, you've heard about the 6 million Jews who were killed in the death camps through euthanasia, gas, whatever means. But there were experiments on other people that were considered to be subhuman as well. Homosexuals, handicapped, Slavs. These were considered to be less human than the Germans were. Again, you got a little bit of the Protestant Catholic flavor in that German approach. out of that arose the Nuremberg Code. The Nuremberg Code is simply the code that talks about informed consent. The patient will have to be fully informed of all of the aspects to it, and then will have to consent to it without pressure, without any sort of coercion, whether financial or peer pressure, or they have to be free to choose it without any consequences for themselves. Now that, again, the COVID lockdowns, I think, violated all of those things in terms of the Nuremberg Code. It was totally set aside. In some places, if you didn't follow the mandates and if you didn't get vaccinated, you would lose your job because of the threat to public health. While at the same time, public health was taking lives on an unprecedented scale to assist people in their choice, as if their choice was the foremost consideration in the medical profession. In other words, they were following the Nuremberg Code. So add to the irony, they appealed to the Nuremberg Code because it's an informed consent process, while over here they abolished the informed consent process. And then people take their lives through suicide. We talk about the terror, the horrible effects of suicide. What's the horrible effect? I think it's that it's not managed from above. If we intend the deaths, if we plan the deaths, then it's okay. But if people take their own lives without assistance from the government, then it's a problem. What's the problem that they seem to be identifying? Is it the taking of human life? Clearly not, right? It couldn't be, because in both cases human life is taken. What is the problem then? Sure. Yeah, the government didn't do it. If the government had done it, then somebody would have got paid for it at least. You took away your own life and nobody benefited from it. And the government certainly didn't get its share of the benefits. Because remember, the healthcare system is there, they have to be paid, and then the workers that deal with the distress of the doctors acting to kill the patients, they have to deal with that whole and they all have a pension plan and so forth. The government is upset that you've sacrificed a life without any benefit to the public. This is a waste of resources. We're not going to solve this problem in the class, and I'm not even trying to. I'm just pointing out an interesting parallel, and it's the product of a similar ethic that looks at people in a way that is not human. That's the chief problem here. It begins back in the garden, right? Cain slays his brother Abel. The problem of murder. The problem of people not treating other people as image bearers of God. That's there. The Bible talks about this as an actual violation. So in Genesis 9 verse 4, it forbids murder because a human being bears the image of God. This is before the 10 Commandments, by the way, which says thou shalt not murder. But already back in Genesis 9 verse 4, after God has wiped out the human race, with the exception of a few, through the flood, it says that you may not kill. You may not take life. Because the people whose lives you take bear the image of God. God may do it because he's created us. It's under his authority, but we may not. It's not for us to do such a thing. That ethic has been lost in the Enlightenment, and it does not get recovered by the scientific establishment. Comment or question, please. Oh, no, there's no reference to food supply. Although, you mean in this article? No, there's no reference to that per se, although we know that the environmental movement as we speak is concerned about climate change and all other considerations are subordinated to that one great urgent distress, which is threatening nature, which brings us back to the question of what's the relation of humanity to nature. If you don't place a value on human life and see that we bear the image of God, then if the global population of humanity is such that it creates threats to the ecosystem, what might we do to solve that problem? You've heard about carbon footprints and so forth. Well, some people won't have any children. What else will other people do? Where is their ethical hedge? Where's their boundary? What will they not do? Because it's clear in Canada that they are willing to let you take your own life. By the way, this legislation is about to be extended in March to those with mental health problems. It was not initially in 2016, but now it is come. Now there's a big pushback from the doctors' profession saying this is a horrible outcome, but that, as far as I know, I'm not up to date on the absolute latest. There's an argument on this, but at present, come March, if you are depressed, whatever, and you wish for this to happen, they will allow it. This is a benevolent government. Again, my purpose here is not to politicize or whatever. It's to observe a common problem and something that you need to think about, and how to, first of all, to observe it. Second of all, to say this is nothing new. And third of all, to say, however, it is a tendency, come the Enlightenment, to put it into the establishment sees itself as the solution to the problem. Are the authorities, whether the Protestants in Ireland or the scientists in Canada, going to be able to solve the problem, the ethical problem of human nature, especially when we're in enormous national debt? Largely because we're trying to mitigate the consequences of climate change. And, for that matter, saving everyone from COVID. Because you had to pay people while they were locked down because they couldn't make a living, etc. Saving them from the virus. These should trouble everyone, I think they do. And again, this is food for thought. That's the purpose of the lecture. It's to say that Swift deals with the problem, we're still dealing with the problem. Comment or question?
What's the difference to you between doing something like this and maybe taking a bullet for another person?
So what's the difference between giving your organs to somebody and taking a bullet for somebody else? So you step in front that was intended for somebody else. Well, there's a number of differences, I think. There isn't in one sense, because you couldn't have made the suggestion if there wasn't an obvious one that you're losing your life and somebody else is gaining a life, right? You're laying down your life for your friends. What's the difference even from this and what Jesus did at the cross? He offered up his life as a ransom for many. One, it becomes medicalized and it becomes part of the area that operates under the aegis of what we call science. So there's something clinical about it and detached about it, and furthermore, it's part of the whole establishment then. It's not an individual ethical choice. The individual ethical choice, I think, was and remains praiseworthy. To save somebody else's life at the cost of your own is morally blameless, I think. Like, just in the heat of the moment, somebody's about to die, you come in and you intercede. This is morally admirable. We're going to praise somebody who does such a thing. Very rarely will somebody lay down their life for a friend, but Jesus lays down his life for his enemies. That's the comparison in Scripture, right? So that, how much more praiseworthy then? But in this case, it's taking it out of the individual's consent and control and trying to, as I say, through a system, a bureaucracy, a medical bureaucracy, trying to remedy all of human ills as a society. It's creating a system, a science, and it's treating people like numbers. It's playing God. That's what it's doing. Part of it we're going to be okay with. Where's the boundary on this? This is a matter of bioethics. That goes outside the context of this class to be able to get into all that. But I think that the fact that it gets pulled into that level, and at the realm of the doctors are going to make the ethical decision on this, not just the patient's willingness. And let's just say that the patient was informed of all of the consequences and agreed to it, gave consent. Is it ethical to take a person's life, even with that willingness to do it? Is it, well, push it back on you, is it ethical for you to be able to sell yourself into slavery? Because if it is, then you might be willing to enslave yourself for the sake of other people, your family, the cost of that you're going to bear to your family, in which case you put yourself into slavery. Is your body your own? Does it belong to you alone? In Canadian law, it used to be forbidden to sell yourself into slavery. Not just for somebody else to enslave you, but for even to sell yourself. Because you can imagine if you're a 12-year-old girl and your parents don't have enough money to support you, that to help out your family, they're going to pull the strings and, yeah, I'm going to do it for the sake of my family and their nurture. That happens all over the world. So that was forbidden. You cannot sell yourself into slavery. The child's going to say that they did. They're actually going to be subtly coerced by their family, because the family's dying. It's better that one person be enslaved than the whole family. I think that there are enormous ethical complexities in as soon as you systematize it. And back to the doctors, their ethical firewall against unethical practice is the Nuremberg Code. They will not violate their patients' conscience, freedoms, rights. Does the medical establishment acknowledge that? And furthermore, the principle that was there from the time of Hippocrates on, the oath, the Hippocratic Oath, have you heard of it? The component of that which says, first do no harm. It used to be part of the Hippocratic Oath. Not only were you going to do good, you were, first of all, not going to do any harm to the patient. That was part of it. Does the medical establishment swear to the Hippocratic Oath anymore? Yes. Do they swear to that little first do no harm? No, it's no longer in the Hippocratic Oath. It's not in there. So they are willing to do harm to do good. That's the crux of the problem. We're going to help people by harming other people. It's a calculation. It's the greatest possible good at the expense of individuals. Is that? Yes?
Yeah, building on that, just the difference of throwing yourself in front of someone to save them as being the intention to save them rather than
To take your own life. Yes.
a
Because you don't know it's going to kill you, right? You may hit.
Yeah, and rather giving the organs as a justification for the life you already wanted. You already wanted to lay your life down because you didn't want it anymore, and using.
Right, because assisted suicide, the intent is to take your own life. And the intent in saving somebody else is not to take your own life, it's to save that life.
Yeah.
Right? So here, medically assisted suicide, I'm not doing it in order to donate my organs. That's just, okay, I'll get something additionally beneficial out of it. Good point. Yes?
I do just want to point out, I'm sure you might be aware of this, but just for the rest of the class too, not just anybody can just walk into a doctor's office and just say, hey, I want to die.
Correct.
Like there is a very long process and you have to have, typically you have to have some kind of illness or some kind of something that will make your life significantly harder and will have prolonged suffering.
That's the legislation. And I imagine that it's quite often the practice, but it will vary from doctor to doctor because there's no oversight over the doctors. And a doctor that's violated the Hippocratic Oath or doesn't have the Hippocratic Oath and who is willing to look the other way when the Nuremberg Code is violated, is the ethical judgment of the doctor unimpeachable at that point? Are they willing? Because again, the doctors are happy that they're making something morally significant out of their death. There's a little bit too much pride in the statistics here in Canada. There's a lot of pride that we're doing it the Canadian way. we're at the forefront of people taking their lives. And there being a benefit to public health for that. Yes, and then conclude. Yes, go ahead.
Just quick personal story. I have a family member, my brother, committed suicide last year. He had schizophrenia. He was 36 years old. He suffered since he was 15 years old, and we prayed for his death.
He did.
Pardon?
He did.
I prayed for his death.
Okay.
He's been trying to commit suicide for 20 years, once a year, every single year. It was like clockwork. He did not have the option to go to a doctor to help him. And it was gruesome, the outcome. But, so on one side, I feel, a pull toward that as an option for particularly demographic. But we've already seen in society that clients get pushed, and pushed.
That's the problem. And the special case that you cited, those happen. They make for bad laws. And there's a history now of medical establishments like in Nazi Germany being used not to ameliorate individual cases of problems, but actually it getting totally out of hand, and legislation doesn't restrict it. That is the real issue here. But there, yeah, I said I'd come to you. Comfort, do you want to?
I want to speak about difference between abortion and give your organ to someone. Because when my husband was sick, he needed kidney transplant, and someone donated kidney for him. So now he's still alive, and he's strong now.
Yes.
Save his life. But abortion, you kill someone. So that one, I think you are possibly.
Yes, there's an ethical difference between that for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, so these are all special cases and they need to be treated differently. There is complexity. There's also such a thing as our organ harvesting, which does happen. And you can see how it would happen. And again, how does that not happen when there's such a commitment to improving things that will come at the cost of any ethical constraint. That's the problem, really. So we have to have a right view of human nature, we have to have a view of the sanctity of life, and you need to hold to it. It's a bright red line. It really is bright and red. And the complexities are part of the challenge here, but the ethical lines need to be very clearly drawn. You can see already in Jonathan Swift that it's already going the way of the dodo. Anyway, we're done for today.